Indiana football under Kurt Cignetti starting to hit record numbers in recruiting, and the buzz is only growing for 2026.
You are Locked On Hoosiers, your daily podcast on the Indiana Hoosiers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in. It is the Locked On Hoosiers podcast. I'm your man, Jacob Goins. I appreciate you being here, making this your first listen or your first watch every single day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, which is your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. I'm your man, Jacob Goins. Joining me on this Friday edition of Locked On Hoosiers is our Locked On recruiting expert, Brian Smith, IU grad as well. And Brian, last weekend was Indiana's junior day, and you've been covering recruiting long enough, and you even went to Indiana to know that past recruiting days like this for Indiana didn't really create a whole lot of buzz. Just seems to be a different story right now, given the recent success for the Hoosiers.
Well, winning breeds success. And when I was growing up, there weren't very many in-state kids that took IU that seriously unless they dribbled a basketball. Things have flipped, obviously.
Sure.
Winning will do that. Nobody took that hire seriously with Cignetti, myself included. Not going to lie, because I just figured, it's Indiana football, whatever, prove it to me. And they did. Well, now they're getting kids to come to visit from Ohio, Illinois, Indiana, wherever. They have the opportunity to do that. This is the starting point, and this is kind of a dichotomy of how it works. If you don't get kids to your junior day, the chances of you getting them to take OBs generally not that great. Indiana's going to recruit Midwest first. They'll recruit some nationally, but primarily Midwest kids. If you're not getting those guys on your campus, you're probably going to get your butt kicked come official visit season in May and June. So to see them take a step up, I mean, they have, I think, 21 kids signed in the 25 class. To see them get this step up and get more kids on campus now, A, you got a chance to get them back on campus again before the OBE, but B, you have a relationship and you have something to sell instead of a vision. It's one thing to say we're going to be good because, no offense, what the hell else are you going to say? We're going to suck? I mean, it's right. I mean, they had nothing else they could do. Last year was hard. This season, it's a different deal. And they'll get a few Florida kids or Georgia kids mixed in, Virginia, whatever. But you got to get your base first. Indianapolis, Fort Wayne, Cincinnati, Chicago, maybe a little Detroit or Cleveland, and they should be fine. At least 8 to 10 players should come from that region conservatively every year. I mean, it's Indiana. Should be within a 5-hour radius of your campus, and they've done that. So now I've kind of looked at it a little bit differently because I didn't know if they would be able to do that even. I mean, my entire life, Indiana football has been bad. That's just reality. So now that they've done that, I'm pretty interested. Not just because I'm a grad. I'm like, this is one of those rare turnaround. Like Arizona State last year was terrible. Then they end up in the college football playoff. It's the same kind of deal. They should be able to capitalize too. Got to get your local kids first. Then you work on the kids from Texas and other places around the country.
Well, that's what I wanted to bring up to you. And we're going to talk some recruiting specifics and names that we need to know and the fans need to know for 2026, plus Indiana replacing Tino Sincere on the offensive side of the football, how that can affect offensive recruiting moving forward. But I've seen the growing interest in Indiana because I cover Indiana every day. You cover recruiting better than anybody I know, and you've got to be hearing and seeing the growing interest in the great words and the phrases and the quotes coming out of kids that have visited Indiana who all of a sudden are putting the Hoosiers at the top of their list.
I was at what I consider to be the most important 7-on-7 tournament a few weeks ago in South Florida. We call it Battle Miami. Teams from LA to New York, from New York to Houston, South Florida kids, everybody goes. And Indiana even came up at that event. And this is the who's who's of the world. Like everybody in my industry is standing there. Mm-hmm. I was hanging out with Steve Wolfong and Chad and John Garcia. Everybody is there because there's so much. Indiana came up in that a few times. And it's not like I was probing for IU Hoosiers football knowledge. Like that is, no offense, but that is the back of my mind. And they were casually mentioned a few times in conversations. That's when I kind of reminded myself, oh yeah, they were just in the playoff.
Yeah.
I'm not saying they're going and getting a 5-star receiver from South Florida tomorrow. I'm not saying that. But at the same time, this is kind of the starting point where if they can do something this spring in terms of bringing back that and show, okay, this is what we did, this is what we need you for to get us over the hump. And we'll talk about linemen here in a sense that's probably the next step for the program. If they can do that, then you can start to see year-to-year success. Here's a little stat for you. I forget which site I got this off of, but it doesn't surprise me. Final 4 teams in the playoff: Penn State, Notre Dame, Texas, and Ohio State. What did they all have in common with their offensive linemen that started for them? What do you think?
They're massive.
Well, that too. All but one came directly out of the high school ranks.
Ah, makes sense.
Homegrown high school linemen, because it takes forever
Yep.
to develop high school linemen. And anyway, it's chemistry, because it's not about one guy, it's about 5 playing as one, and that's hard.
Yeah.
Indiana, if I'm not mistaken, all but one or all of them were transfer guys. To get them to do what they did was impressive. But they got stonewalled for a lot of that game against Notre Dame because they just weren't as good as Notre Dame's front. It's reality. Now, not many fronts are as good as Notre Dame's, but the difference between Ohio State's O-line and Indiana's is why they got beat by them. And then the difference between Notre Dame's O-line and Indiana, that was the difference. Indiana's starting to get some of those kids on campus too, and that's kind of the next step in the evolution for the Hoosiers.
Yeah, and it starts up front on that offensive line. And you mentioned the key words in state, right? Trying to get, not that Indiana is just the most overflowing, overpowering state for high school football recruiting, but the ones that are here, the Hoosiers have to lock them down. And starting up front, a couple of names will transfer this into the next segment as well. Guys like CJ Skifers, who have put Indiana at the top of their list. I've got him, right? You've got, you have guys from Wisconsin. You have Brock Brownfield, who, I mean, just all these guys who have talked about Indiana have visited, many of them for junior day, and they actually have interest rather than saying, what other state can I possibly go to? Florida or Alabama or South Carolina. They say, hold up, wait a minute. Let's check out the Hoosiers. Let's see what's going on there. And several linemen up front are interested right now.
Well, there's one of the kids that you sent me to look into is a kid from New Palestine. That's just outside of Indianapolis. It's a school I was familiar with where I grew up. There's a kid from Center Grove. Kids that are within an hour of Indiana's campus. If they can't get those kids, especially after the way the O-line played, I mean, they maximized the talent they had. Mm-hmm. They didn't have a ton, in my opinion, of NFL guys, but they were really good college players, some guys that might hang on and make the roster for a year or two in the NFL, but they didn't have any like first round picks, but that's going to get those kids on campus. The secondary part of that is they'll eventually, now it's going to take a little time, they'll eventually be able to wean themselves off of the portal. Because I can tell you from covering Florida State down here in the South, when you use the portal, it can be boom, or like 2024, it can be bust.
That's right.
You get a better sense of what you have when you see them in spring year after year after year. Most linemen do not develop until they are 3 years fully removed from high school at minimum. Nobody likes hearing that, but there is no quick way to make it work. Yeah. So if Indiana can get a 4 or 5 man O-line class, hopefully, again, 2 or 3 kids from Indiana to start would be great. Maybe they get a kid from Louisville or St. X in Cincinnati or something to fill out the rest. But if you can do that this year, it would be very advantageous because, I mean, going 11-1 is ridiculous. At any school, it's hard. But at Indiana, that's the greatest season in the history of the school. So this is very, very important. And I was curious looking at the list and some of the kids that had come in. I'm like, okay, they figured this out, and they're getting them on campus in a timely fashion. This is only going to get better for the Hoosiers.
They're making all sorts of waves in the 2026 class, not just on the offensive line, big names on the defensive line, linebackers as well. And when you bring in a guy like Whitmer on the offensive side in the coaching room, who's been around some of the best quarterbacks in the history of the game, you might start to make a little buzz offensively as well. We continue talking Indiana football recruiting with Brian Smith, our Locked On recruiting expert, right after this here on the Locked On Hoosiers podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers is brought to you by Game Time. It is the go-to ticketing app, the only place you need for attending NFL playoff games. And right now, it's the Super Bowl. You're trying to go, use Game Time. You want to start going to college basketball games or concerts or theater, whatever the case may be, Game Time is the place to go. They have this feature called Game Time Picks where it's going to filter out all the fluff. You don't have to scroll for hours and hours trying to price match and do all this. No. Game Time's going to do all of that for you, show you the best seats for the best price. And my favorite feature to pair with that is their all-in pricing. You toggle that, you're going to see your total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. And so you can use that, again, whether you want to go to the Super Bowl or you want to start attending college basketball games, or if you want to go to MLB games coming up in just a few months, Game Time is the only place that you need. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. That's Locked On College for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back into Locked On Hoosiers, your daily spot for all things Indiana athletics. Later on in the show, we'll talk about Indiana as they go on the road, Indiana basketball, that is, on the road tonight at number 10 Purdue. We won't make Brian Smith, our recruiting expert, talk about Indiana basketball. He's an Indiana grad, but he don't want to touch that with a however long 100-foot pole, Brian, maybe something like that.
That's fair. That's fair.
He has no interest in talking in what's going on the hardwood, but that's because there's so much happening in recruiting. And we mentioned a couple of big offensive lineman names, but one on the defensive line that I asked you to look into a little bit, a guy that you've heard of, somebody that Indiana fans need to know, King Liggins. First of all, his name is King, which is pretty remarkable. He's a kid from next door over in Illinois. He's a 3-star defensive lineman, 6'4", 265, and he loved his time at Indiana for junior day.
This is one of the kids that I'd heard about last summer going into the fall that was, like Notre Dame, Michigan, everybody was going to take a look at. So when you sent me his name, I was like, oh, okay, because that's a kid they don't normally get on campus. It's just not. And he's got potential to be an NFL player one day. I'm not saying he's a pure 5-star or anything like that, but he's one of the better players in the Midwest. I didn't have to go look up his film because I'd seen it before. It's a very good football player. This is yet another sign that you're not just talking about a program making a move. This is like, oh, this is a little different because D-line are the most coveted. There's not enough of them that are above 250 that can move. Right. They just aren't anywhere near enough. So kid in Chicago where everybody recruits, Notre Dame, Michigan, Wisconsin, everybody's going to go. For them to be involved with him is another sign of the things to come because, let's be honest, when was the last time Indiana got a big-time D-line recruit out of Chicago? Has that happened in my life?
Probably not. Not that I can remember.
So that was a sign to me when you sent me that, and I looked and I'm like, oh, okay. We've got a little bit of a change in the top of the food chain here. So good for Indiana. It's kind of, I'm not just saying because I went to IU, but it's kind of tiresome that the exact same schools end up winning most years. And it's one of the reasons I also kind of rooted for SMU, in the playoff. Like SMU's football history since the death penalty has not been all that great.
No.
So it was kind of cool to see them too. And I hope they have recruiting success to that front. But look, man, when you can get guys with that kind of length that can play strong side end or 3-tech, and other teams have to at least somewhat plan for them, it changes your defense. Look at the inside guys Indiana had that transferred in. When teams didn't pay attention to them, they created havoc.
Yeah.
That's why Indiana's defense, like Notre Dame couldn't run the ball consistently against them. I know Jeremiah had the long run, but outside of that, they really didn't do great. That's because they had true guys inside. You've got to recruit that spot high. So that was a really big thing for me. Good fit for Indiana if they can get him because he's a good ball player.
Just you said it, getting guys like that on campus. I feel like Indiana, in terms of recruiting, and you'll be able to speak on this a little bit better, Indiana's still in that spot of wow, it's great. We're getting 3, 4, 5 stars on campus. But eventually, right, Brian, that mantra, that has to turn. You've got to flip that eventually and say, okay, we're past that point of just being shocked and wowed that they're here. Now you've got them to commit here. But the things that these guys were saying after junior day, I feel like we're slowly or possibly even faster getting to that point. Do you agree?
Well, I would say so. I've read a few of the tea leaves, and I try not to get too involved with it regardless. I don't care if it was Ohio State or Notre Dame.
Sure.
Like their junior days went really well. Shocker. They were just in the national title game.
Right.
And they're also Ohio State, Notre Dame. But it's still the NIL era. Somebody put up a post, I forget which site it was, that I read. It was one of the moderators. And he said, why isn't that so many aren't following recruiting quite as much anymore? And they're like, it's because of the portal. Because so many of the kids, we get them here, but are they going to stay, this and that? So I don't pay attention to it quite as much. Okay, I get it. But your goal is still to get as many top-notch guys on your campus as possible. And again, as somebody who follows Florida State closely, trust me, you don't want to be portal reliant. You can look at the 2-10 record for the Seminoles and understand why. So Indiana hit the home run last year. But if you're going to sustain success, this is how you do it. And like I'm looking at a profile over here that you gave me, a kid that I watched film of, Jaden Williams. He's out of Massillon, Northern Ohio. It's one of the most tradition-rich programs in the country. Pure middle linebacker. He's a great, great prospect. I mean, I take that kid in a heartbeat, especially after the kind of linebacker play Indiana had. Obviously, having an All-American kind of helps. But getting kids like that around your program, Jaden's a kid who plays at a tradition-rich school. I'm not sure if Ohio State's after him. If they're not, that's on them. But if they can start getting kids like that, then you're just going to change your program wholeheartedly.
Another linebacker to keep an eye on out of Kentucky, Jacob Savage, somebody who has spoken highly of Indiana as well, just trying to fill that spot. And linebackers are one where you can never have enough. You can never have too much talent because of how important they are on the defensive side of the football. Do want to flip to the offensive side again, though, because the news that broke a couple of weeks ago, and I mentioned it on one of my shows earlier this week, Brian, it's the I'm not saying underwhelming. It's under the radar hire of Chandler Whitmer on the offensive side as a co-offensive coordinator and now a quarterbacks coach who was the passing game coordinator for the Atlanta Falcons. This guy's got his fingerprints on all of the biggest names who have played quarterback in, I don't know, the past decade of college and guys playing on Sundays. Any word or possible momentum here for Indiana recruiting offensively with a guy like Whitmer on your staff?
Well, he's worked with some really good. I mean, he's been around Ohio State. He's been around Clemson. That's a great start. And he's also been with the Chargers. I mean, they've obviously got a great quarterback there.
Yeah.
Going to Indiana, and he's like 33 years old. You're going to be able to sell quarterbacks on the players you've been around. I call him Blondie, but, you know, when you're the first pick in the draft, you got C.J. Stroud, who's second pick in the draft, setting rookie records. I mean, it's just insane what they've been around and how Indiana got him to come. I know the court got the Coke title and all that. Yeah. Even the NFL, man, I'm sure you could have got another gig. Get NFL jobs, people get fired constantly. I don't care how good you are. Yeah. For him to come to Indiana, I thought that just kind of showed that the cachet was there. And I'm going to guess that one of the reasons they took him, and I know nothing about him personally, he's got to have some charisma to him because you need young recruiters on your staff everywhere. The difference between somebody that's 50 and 30 right now is like 100 years because of the digital age.
Especially with an older head coach, too, in Kurt.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Do you think that Kurt is scrolling right now on TikTok? I do not.
Do you think he knows it even got banned for 24 hours?
I'm not going to comment on that. But at the same time, I also know that if you can sell quarterback, it changes your program.
That's very true.
Name a team that has done poorly at quarterback that made a run in the college football playoff or the NFL playoff. Zero. You have to be good there. I don't care which level of football it is. You stink at quarterback, you're done. So they got a guy that's got all that experience, Trevor Lawrence, etc. I'm shocked that they got him to come there. I don't know what he's going to get, but I bet you money that they have guys come on campus that are quarterback recruits. They're going to be like, okay, well, you coached with Stroud. You've been around Trevor. Yeah, let's see what this guy has to say. And once people Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say a chance to prove all that with Fernando Mendoza now, who is
100%.
seemingly going to be your starter, and you bring back your top 2 receivers, plus Jordan Stays from Tennessee, the tight end. I mean, Indiana has a chance to prove all of that offensively again and show that to 26 and 27 recruits.
Well, that's the thing. Like, they also got, like, I had the opportunity to see Mendoza come through the high school ranks when I lived in Florida, and I saw him play live last year to Auburn and absolutely just hog-tie them on third down with precision passing. He had no offensive line and still made him look bad. At one point, I believe they were 7 out of 8 on third downs. I don't care what level you're at. That's good. They couldn't run the ball, save their life, but they were able to throw it on 3rd and 6 when it's terrible. It's because of Mendoza. With those receivers coming back, this should be a pretty easy sell for Indiana. Do not be surprised that the Hoosiers land a few recruits, especially offensive skill guys, that some other school is going to be like, wait a minute, how did Indiana do that? It's because of the success they had last year, and they should have again this upcoming season.
He is an IU grad and our Locked On recruiting expert, Brian Smith, who joins me anytime I ask him, and always appreciate him. And when there's stuff to talk about, makes it a little bit more fun and easier to have great content covering Indiana football and recruiting for 2026, 2027, and beyond. Final segment of Locked On Hoosiers coming up. We're talking basketball as Indiana on the road in West Lafayette tonight. Can they somehow pull a miracle against Purdue and end this horrific streak? We'll have that for you coming up on our final segment right here on Locked On Hoosiers. All right, final segment here on today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers. Thank you so much to Brian Smith, our Locked On recruiting expert, IU grad. Always love to have that part of the show and get an Indiana person here as well. And great conversation about what Indiana football is trying to do for 2026, 2027, and possibly even beyond. But Indiana basketball is in action tonight. We are on the road for one of our biggest games of the year. Doesn't matter the record, doesn't matter the number next to your name. This game always matters. We're on the road at West Lafayette, taking on Purdue. Now, you start to bring some of those numbers back into the equation, of course, with the ranking of Purdue being the number 10 team in the country. You also bring in some of the numbers, the fact that, in case you haven't looked, Indiana hasn't won very many games lately. And the fact that Purdue is pretty good, right? So all of that does play a factor here. But if Indiana can somehow, some way, put everything behind them and just single this game out and put everything you've got into this matchup, we are talented enough to win this game. I don't care that we've lost 4 out of our last 5 games. Doesn't matter to me. I don't care that you blew it against Maryland, fell apart against Northwestern, had to get to overtime to beat Ohio State, and got the doors blown off of you by Illinois and Iowa. I don't care. Doesn't matter to me. Doesn't matter that Braden Smith is one of the best point guards and one of the best guards in general in all of college basketball. I don't care that Purdue lost one big center and they bring in another forward that's been dominating the lane so far in Trey Kaufman-Renn. Don't care. If Indiana could put everything they've got, if we go into this game and say we are determined to put our full effort, our full energy, our full focus on Purdue, I, Jacob Goins, firmly believe that we are talented enough to win this game. Do we have the coaching ability to win it? I don't know. Probably not, to be completely honest with you. But sometimes talent can just take over. And sometimes talent can win you games. And I think, believe it or not, other than Braden Smith, and Fletcher Lawyer scares me too, but Braden Smith is the one that really sticks out to me. If you can just control him and don't let him control the game, and what I mean by that is he's a guy that averages 15 points a game, but he's also somebody that gets 5 boards and 9 assists. He does it all for them. He commands the offense. He gets the pick and rolls going. He finds the open man. He sets some of the best screens in college basketball and receives some of the best screens in college basketball. If Indiana can limit his presence, with it being Miles Rice or Trey Galloway or whoever it may be guarding him and rotating throughout the night, we have a chance to win this game, because I think between Malik Renew and Umar Ballo, you match up pretty well with Trey Kaufman-Renn and with Daniel Jacobson, their center down low, who averages 6-7 points a game. Somebody that is an impact, but not what we've seen in the past at Purdue. I just think we sort of match up well. They don't shoot the three ball great. What is their percentage? 38% as a team. So fairly high, but they're also a team like most teams at this level. If you leave them open, they will make you pay. And that's where Indiana has gotten burned time and time and time again. Indiana cannot fall asleep in this game because Purdue's going to run flawless offensive sets. Purdue will be ready. Painter will have this team ready to go. And they're at home. It's a Friday night. The Purdue fans know that we're struggling. They know that Indiana is down. They know that we are tearing ourselves apart, whether it be online or in the locker room, on the bus, doesn't matter. This program is going in the wrong direction, and Purdue knows that. And they'd love nothing more than to give us our third straight loss and our fifth in our last 6 games. But if we can just play with effort, you've got to start both halves with high energy. If you come out flat, Purdue will be up 15-0 before we can even blink, and the game will be over just like that. Even if it's close at halftime, we can't come in to the second half of this game and just act like we don't know what's going on, act like we don't want to be there, because Purdue can go on runs and make shots, and they will put you and bury you under the floor in West Lafayette. We have to play a focused 40 minutes. Woody, step out of the way, man. Let the players go. There's obviously miscommunication happening. There's obviously some confusion between player and coach. Let them go. Let them do their thing. Let Miles Rice have a good game. Let Trey Galloway, who you said the fans are doing him dirty, right? Let him do his thing. Get Bryson Tucker back on the floor. Where the heck has he been, right? And if Malik Reneau can stay out, and I'm just going to keep listing things here. Malik Reneau has to stay out of foul trouble. Umar Ballo has to have a physical presence inside offensively and defensively, and he can't get in foul trouble either. And Mackenzie Mbako, can he continue to play well? Can he knock down shots? Can he grab boards? Can he get out and run? And he's going to have to play some defense in this game too. I'm sorry, he is. If all of those things can happen, and my goodness, the list keeps going. It's like a CVS receipt, right? If all of these things can happen, Indiana will have a chance to win, because Purdue, look, they're a top 10 team in the country for a reason, folks. They're a top 10 team for a reason. I know that they lost to Ohio State. It was by 3. Doesn't matter. They bounced back and beat a top 25 Michigan team. They've lost 1 game in Big Ten play all season long. They beat Minnesota, Northwestern, Rutgers, Nebraska, Washington. Doesn't impress me. But their wins over Oregon and Michigan look pretty good. And somehow their schedule is not as difficult as most. But I still think Purdue's a really good team. And Indiana has to find a way to forget about what's happened in the last 5, the last 10, last 20, doesn't matter. Forget everything else this season and focus on Purdue. Because I truly believe we match up well. I think if we knock down shots, don't turn the ball over, play with maximum effort for 40 minutes, Indiana can have a chance to win this game tonight on the road at Purdue. This could be the game to turn it around. This could be the game that this could be your NCAA tournament winning game. This could be the game that gets you to the tournament if you can survive this stretch that we've talked about. But it starts tonight. It starts tonight against Purdue on the road against your biggest rival in a top 10 teams building. Everybody's watching. It's on Fox television. Everybody's watching. How bad do you want it? If you're Indiana, I think we find out everything we need to know about this team's character, about their motivation, about their care, about their want. I think we find all of that out right here tonight when Indiana goes on the road to take on number 10 Purdue inside their building. All right, that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers. Thank you so much for being here. Really do appreciate it. Been another fantastic week. Again, want to shout out and say thank you for 4,500 subscribers that we hit late on Wednesday afternoon, Wednesday evening. So thank you so much for that as well. Looking forward to what is hopefully a really good game coming up tonight. All right, Hoosier fans, stay safe. We'll have more episodes coming up for you. Watch out for possible bonus episodes. You just never know. Be sure you're a subscriber and have those notifications turned on just in case. And until next time, Hoosier fans, stay safe. I'll talk to you later.